Welcome to the Not a Lonely Coffee Break podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Maddie.
Yeah. And I'm Meaghan. We are a podcast about coffee and work, but make it queer.
Something really exciting popped up on my social media memories
Ooh.
this past week on the weekend. Our 1-year anniversary, joining forces and starting the initial conversations to launch this podcast. It wasn't
Wowzers.
for anyone who's maybe listening in for the first time. Initially, when Meaghan and I sat down at a
Yep.
podcast was not really on our radar at that time. We actually talked about maybe even launching a full-on organization.
Mm-hmm.
And then
we went with it. We rolled with it.
Meaghan and I met on a regular basis, kind of hashing out ideas, brainstorming, and after probably about 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months.
We felt like it was morphing into something different, and that different was this podcast. And once we sort of decided we're a podcast, everything just like happened so fast.
Yeah, we just went with it, rolled with it. We're like, hell yeah, that's what we actually wanted to do.
So happy podcast anniversary to us.
Aww.
Yay! Cheers!
Cheers. We even took a picture that day at the bar.
We did.
Yeah, because we hadn't seen each other in years. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was actually the first time that Meaghan and I had reconnected in person since the incident. since kind of going through the shared workplace trauma experience. And it was fun and also healing. I think it was like the needed part of our healing journey.
Yeah, we had to grow. We had to figure things out, realign what we wanted to do, because it really did change like our, I feel like planning is always something that they tell you to do, but it never works out to plan, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always have to readjust, and that's what we were doing. So,
yeah.
But we met back in our little intersection here.
Mm-hmm.
So yay, happy anniversary.
I know, so exciting.
It is exciting.
I actually have been binge watching the new season of Selling Sunset.
Okay. I've never seen that before.
Oh my gosh, it's fantastic. You want to talk about drama? There were 2 options, Selling Sunset or The Debate.
Okay.
Both of them would give you some drama, I feel like.
Okay.
But there is some stuff, I have not finished it yet, but there is some stuff that every season is dramatic, but this one is like super dramatic. I'm just going to say no one can make me hate you, Chriselle. I'm a Chriselle fan, and no one can make me hate her. But tell you that to say, every time I watch it, I kind of get some interesting, and because I'm a Chriselle fan, I get some interesting thoughts, because my brain goes there, around the importance of boundaries.
Yeah.
And having them in the workplace. I think that's one thing that kind of drew me into the show, was that Chriselle, so I started watching it because Chriselle had come out as queer and is married to G-Flip, non-binary drummer / musician person.
Okay.
And so I was curious. I started watching last season, and of course I got sucked in, but I was kind of sucked into how Chriselle goes about establishing boundaries around her queer identity, and sort of protect herself as well as her partner.
Right.
And so that just kind of continues into this season, although a little bit more dramatically, I feel like.
So is it like a written drama, or is it like this?
It's reality.
It's reality show. Okay, I'm curious.
I mean, there's gotta be some stuff that's written. I mean, I feel like it is it's too dramatic for that to be real life.
I mean, my life is pretty dramatic, but
it's a reality show on Netflix. They are real estate agents in LA.
Okay.
And they sell like a disgusting amount of money for houses. I think they started this season with like a house that was like $30 million. And I
How
was like,
nice. Ugh. But let's focus on the drama, not the money, okay?
yeah, but I was like, this is a gorgeous house, but who hates who right now?
That sounds about right. No, that's
So,
really interesting. But so like as far as like setting boundaries, like how do they do that?
well, I guess it's different for everyone, but I am curious. I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong way. I don't know. I guess there sometimes can be a wrong way, but you have to do what's best for you, and everyone's
Mhm.
boundaries are going to look different. So I think the first step you have to do as an individual is figure out what you're okay with and what you're not okay with,
Right. Right.
and then figure out how you're going to communicate that. But I am curious, Meaghan, since you're kind of in a manager-like position,
Right.
are there things that you do to like help encourage your staff to have boundaries?
It's kind of a interesting position because I was a staff member, like a team member, and then I kind of elevated into the role of office manager. And so I had to actually change my boundaries a little bit, right? Because when you go out with your teammates and stuff like that, I've spoken with a few and people about this, but they're like, you probably go out with your coworkers too often. So, right, it's about your boundaries, right? But even though I'm going out to like have a dinner with them or a drink with them, like there are still some lines where I'm not giving them like all my my dreams, my aspirations, what's going on in my marriage, not things like that, but like on the surface things, like things I like to do for fun, things that maybe we have in common with each other, like the debate, things that are going on. But there are some boundaries that sometimes we have to like reassess. So when I got into the office manager role, I definitely had to take a step back and kind of reassess like, okay, what does this mean when I'm trying to lead people? But then also, I don't want to make myself too vulnerable, because when you make yourself vulnerable, there's that conflicting ideas of like, well, how am I going to talk to this person about this because I feel like they're my friend? Or how am I going to give them criticism or even just tell them, hey, plainly, you're not doing this correctly. I need you to do it this way without breaking trust, because there's like years of trust that I've built with my team members in a different type of position. So I think that, I have told them like, hey, I don't go out during the week anymore. I definitely stay home. Anything that has to do with my stressors as a leader, as a manager, I don't discuss that with them. You know, unless it involves them, right? So just really needing to identify like what is something I want to share with them and what do I not. As far as my personal boundaries, like what goes on in my like how I may identify like as a straight person or as a queer person, like so there's things that are growing in my life that I'm not really sure about right now. So I don't discuss those things with them, right? Because those are things that I don't want to be vulnerable about. And so I think as a leader, whenever you're talking to people, you strictly like, yes, it's okay to chit chat and like have some things, but if someone is getting a little bit too personal, be like, hey, maybe this is not a right space to talk about that. We can talk about it after work. Or if they're if they're talking in front of a group of people that I think that they might be compromising how their team members might think about them, I'm like, hey, maybe we should just do a one-on-one on this. Let's step aside later and talk about it. And it doesn't have to be about, yeah, I'm talking about like maybe there's a family issue going on. Maybe there's something going on with their kids or with their marriage. It doesn't necessarily need to be spoken to your team members because it may put you in a vulnerable position that you don't want to be in.
Right.
So there's just different ways, I think, in my personal experience that I've had to like take a step back, but then also rebuild that connection, with my team members. And it is difficult, because it's like at the same time, I felt like I was isolating myself.
I think it's also just kind of speaking from my own personal experience. When I was first entering the workforce, I didn't really have an idea of what my boundaries were. right? Because I was still learning stuff. That was my first time sort of being in this kind of environment. Like I had jobs in college and stuff, but it was a different setup, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I sort of stepped into the professional world, I didn't know what those were up front. And so then it was like the longer I got into things, I was having to sort of define and redefine what boundaries were. I felt like on a constant basis. And then, I think in our shared experience, there were some things that I went into it saying like, yeah, this is my boundary. And then those started to disappear, where
Mm-hmm.
I started compromising my own boundaries that I thought I was solid in.
Right.
And that, in my personal opinion, at least, just based on my experiences, that was a clear red flag
Yeah.
of toxicity in the workplace, was that my boundaries that I thought I had been clear about, even though they seemed sort of minor. Big example that I use a lot is that idea of sending emails after
After
work
a certain time period.
hours,
Yeah.
after a certain time period. And initially, I say that, and initially they're like, yeah, absolutely, that's a great idea. But when you don't practice that,
Mm-hmm.
and you, even the first second I emailed past that cutoff time, I was saying this is a boundary that I'm okay for you to
Right.
disrespect.
Yes. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so it just sort of grew and grew and grew to where we were responding to emails at midnight.
Mm-hmm. No, and that's something I think we shared as far as, our shared experience in
Mm-hmm.
work. But like also because okay, so yeah, I mean I had no boundaries whatsoever when it came to work because when COVID happened, we were working from home. So
Right.
I felt like I just had to fill in all this time. I had to like, but then I also felt that more was being asked of me. And
Mm-hmm.
so for for me, it was like, well, I need this job. I got to keep this job. So I just got to do what I got to do. And so I
Right.
disrespected my own boundaries in that. And
Mm-hmm.
so a person who may not have experience of like, hey, I don't have to answer this email at 1 o'clock in the morning, or
Mm-hmm.
for one, I don't even need to look at my email at 1 o'clock in the morning because that's not what my job title really needs me to do right now, right? I'm not in a
Mm-hmm.
spot where there is an emergency after
Mm-hmm.
5 o'clock.
It got to the point, I feel like, where I was kind of like, are we still going to be broke at 8 a.m.? Like me responding to the email at midnight,
Right.
is it going to change the current
Anything.
situation? Or is it something that this is still going to be a crisis at 8
Mm-hmm.
a.m.?
Mm-hmm.
And it can wait.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, that was a clear sign that something was up.
Yeah. For sure. So, like, some ways that you can probably set yourself up for success is like now the phones are getting really good, right? Where you can turn it off, put it on sleep mode,
Mm-hmm.
like turn off your work stuff. I know a lot of people turn off the social media at a certain time, but definitely turn off the work stuff at a certain period in time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even if a coworker is texting you and it's like not like you said, a 911 situation, are we still going to have the situation in the morning and is anything going to change? Probably not. Then just
Mm-hmm.
leave it alone, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, it's hard, but I do think so. Even that's for anyone, right? But I was just kind of thinking around, even just like, have I established any boundaries sometimes around my identity as a queer woman? Um, and it may not be something that I initially consider as a boundary. I do think that sometimes I can sort of lay the groundwork for compromising boundaries right away by not being who I am, right? By not revealing that I have a wife. And that can or someone who's like, I don't want to sort of disturb the normalcy by being too out and proud. So I am just going to fly under the radar, do my work. I don't want to tick anybody off. And so they start then becoming like the yes person, right? Because I don't want to tell you no. I don't want to be gay and that person that says no.
Right.
So we start to maybe take small compromises and just maybe our own boundaries that we don't consider a boundary at the time. Then it becomes problematic. And you're like, I have said yes to too many things.
And then you have to kind of step back and go have that conversation. Hopefully you have a leader that is like, you know what, yeah, you're probably doing a little too much. It's okay to take a step back. And then being in a workplace where you're able to, I've been in both types of situations where it's like, hey, you were performing up here and all of a sudden you're like at a 5 or a 6. What happened? Where did that Meaghan go? And I'm like, well, I'm still here. It's just that maybe I needed to take a notch down because I can't work at that capacity for so long, right?
I needed to practice self-care.
Yeah, but it's been in both situations where, I mean, because I do have a tendency of working too hard, right? And recently, I've had a conversation with my boss and he's like, hey, it's okay. Like, you need to take care of you so that you can continue what you're doing. And I think that was probably the most positive conversation, most simple conversation I've had with a leader in a long time, where they were like, I appreciate what you're doing and what you're trying to do, but it's okay to take a step back because I'm still going to need you here performing at a good rate, and I think that finding a good leader and like making sure that you're having those types of conversations where like, are they supporting you in this way? Or are they telling you, hey, look, it's not enough. And that could be probably a red flag because then we're having different issues here.
Well, yeah, I think it's really important. Like, leadership matters, right? If you have a leader who is showing and demonstrating their healthy boundaries and not compromising their own boundaries, then you as the employee will see that and say, this is awesome. It's a company policy that we don't send emails past 5:30. Like, nobody is doing that. And so I think that matters. Meaghan and I recently also had a chat with someone that it was a tough conversation, but I think it also kind of boils down to boundaries. Meaghan and I have been somewhat being reached out to by our shared experience and various members who were involved. And they've been wanting to meet with us and chat with us. And so finally we sat down and met with them. And I don't know, Meaghan, we talked about this after, but like, I was really proud of both of us and what we were able to sort of advocate for. Say, like, in order for us to, I guess, be willing to maybe even come to the table and continue this conversation, like, we want to see boundaries of accountability,
right,
to ensure that your employees don't get mistreated in the future.
Well, having safeguards,
Yeah.
making sure that you're in a workplace that has safeguards, that if, if you can't go to the chain of command, if your next person to go to is not hearing you, they're
or they're the perpetrator of the microaggression even.
Right. Is there a safeguard where you can go to someone else and have a productive conversation, productive action taken, as far as it can be investigated, it can be fixed or addressed in a different manner, where it's instead of just continuing to just deal and take it, where, and at the end of the day, I think at the end of the day, none of us want to be out in the market looking for another job constantly.
Right.
It's not a sense of security in your home, in yourself. So having a workplace where they have those safeguards, where they have the checks and balances, I think will provide a sense of safety for the employees as well,
Mhm.
But it is interesting because, you find that in small business, small nonprofits, they may not have those checks and balances because
Mhm.
that means cost, it means people,
Right.
time. But there are, I think that, after our conversation with this person, we found that, hey, there could have been
Mhm.
definitely a
Mhm.
safeguard and it wouldn't have cost the organization anything.
Mhm.
And so, you know, kind of recapping, finding boundaries in your work, right? In the nature of your work and how you do your work and making sure you have someone there, some sort of safeguard to protect the amount of energy you're putting into it and making sure that you're
Mhm.
staying safe, but then also the emotional boundary
Yep.
and like you said, the boundary of identity, and
Yeah.
making sure that's not being targeted as well. And I think for us, unfortunately, we had all three of those things being kind of
Mhm.
damaged.
Yes,
So,
we did.
and so we probably
I
could
do
have
think
red flags wasn't really trendy at the time for everyone's
no, I think
point of view
so.
here.
One thing that I have really felt like I have at least gotten better with. Now I'm not in the same kind of work that I was, so I don't know if this would translate if I were to go back into like one full-time type of job. I feel like I have a better understanding about what my boundaries are because I knew what was causing me the main sources of stress. Now, I'm not saying that I have it perfect. There are still lots of areas that I still need to define some better boundaries for. But I feel like I've gotten a lot better with some of that. And you learn and you grow and you learn and grow. But I do think it's important to sit down and determine what some of your non-negotiables are, especially about your identity and how
Right.
that's treated in the workplace, right? Because that's even different for everyone. A few weeks ago we had Chelsea on the show, and Chelsea kind of shared with us that it's not a big deal to them to like be misgendered, that they just because they sense for the most part people's intentions are not malicious or anything. So
Right.
they just kind of brush it off, right? But for some people that might be a non-negotiable of saying like,
Absolutely.
no, I need you to get my pronouns correct every single time. That's important to me. And so you need to kind of know that up front so that you know when to go to those safeguards, whether it's a manager, HR, an anonymous reporting system, whatever your company has in place. Because if you don't know what that is, I feel like it makes it harder for people to speak up because you almost kind of second guess yourself even. And like, am I making a bigger deal about this than I need to? You start honestly like gaslighting yourself.
Right. It compromises your ability to function, because you're all of
Mm-hmm.
a sudden, instead of worrying about your performance at work, you're worrying about, am I doing too much? Am I saying too much? Am I giving out too
Mm-hmm.
much? And your focus completely switches. And then
Mm-hmm.
they're going to come back to you and say, well, why is this? Well, yeah, definitely. As far as, like you said, I mean, you should explore what does that even look like? You know, I'm sure some managers and companies may be like the first thing you come in, hey, this is how you report this is how you do this. If you ever have an issue, you can report this to this anonymous tip line or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But then in other organizations, they may not highlight that. So if they haven't done that with you, I would definitely do some research and see what that does look like. Um,
Yeah,
Even if it's not
absolutely.
happening to you right now, but you don't want to be in a state of crisis where you're like, holy moly,
Mm-hmm.
this is happening to me,
Mm-hmm.
and then trying to figure out later.
You might not be in a situation where it's like toxic, people are being abusive left and right, but sometimes stuff gets overlooked. And so, what better way to create even more inclusivity in your workplace than to see, you know what is our system for this? Do we have one? Can we get one? Like, what would that look like here? What would that look like for us? Just because you never know what comes up in the future. It's always important. I think it's just important to have it
Mhm.
and hope that you never need it.
And then Hopefully never use it. Yeah, that
Yeah,
would be nice.
hopefully you never need it, but then you have it. So boundaries, they're important. It's just, I don't know, it's been a theme in multiple conversations I've had with people in various settings around the importance of boundaries. Some people don't have them.
Yeah, some do not. Yes, I've definitely worked with a few that just say it out, and I have said, I don't think you should really talk about that here. Thank you for sharing. But there have been times where I'm like, I don't agree with you, and I also don't think this is the right place to be talking about this. Because it's tension, it has tension and things like that. And anywho, I can digress on it. Yeah, no, there are definitely a lot of people out there that just a show on just people who don't have any boundaries at all.
We could also probably do a whole series on boundaries. Like, it's just, but I also think, just in my own experience, right? I've gotten a lot better for like creating my own boundaries or whatever, but I also feel like I've learned a lot about making sure that I'm doing what I can to be a safe person for someone else to come to me and say, hey, when you did this, I felt uncomfortable or whatever, because I'm human. Like, I'm not perfect.
Right.
And my boundaries might look different than someone else's boundaries. And so if you don't share those with other people, if you don't communicate that, how are people supposed to learn and grow around holding space for those important conversations about boundaries? All important.
It's all important.
Yeah, we would though love to hear from you guys about your boundaries. What are some important boundaries that you have established for yourself around your identity in the workplace, right? What are some of your non-negotiables? So please share with us on social media, on YouTube, on all the places. We would love to hear from you.
Right, exactly. There's different levels of boundaries, and I think also when you go into different types of workplaces, or like if you're switching jobs and things like that, and you're having to reestablish yourself, there might be things that may change in you where you're like, you know what, I feel more comfortable. This area feels safer for me. The people are safer for me. Then yeah, your boundaries may change, and I think that checking in on oneself is also very important, and making sure that you're not, putting yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in.
Safety is important. I do think, like, sometimes you have to figure out what's going to be the most safe for me. We want everyone to be safe. But great chat today. I am out of coffee, though.
Yeah, I'm back, almost done.
Make sure that you have subscribed to our channel on YouTube and Spotify, whichever your preferred method of listening to us is.
Subscribe, ring the bell.
Ring the bell if you're on YouTube, so that way you'd never miss an episode. And also, you guys, share it with your friends. Follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Patreon. We do have some exclusive content. If you join our Coffee Crew Club. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for Not a Lonely Coffee Break. We are always thrilled to have you join us for your break. We are your hosts. I'm Maddie.
And I'm Meaghan.
And we hope to see you next time.
Cheers.
Cheers, Queen.